Good morning. Welcome to Rising. So Ryan is out this week, but today you guys have to put up with me all day. Somehow we're gonna deal with this, right, Robbie?
Yes, excited to deal with it. Always fun when it's just the two of us. We love Ryan too, but today, just us.
Today's just us, but then tomorrow and the rest of the week, there's another, I think Brianna Joy Gray is filling in for Ryan Grimm, so, and then he'll be back next week, but.
Right, it's a rotating cast of co-hosts. We can surprise the audience every day, so.
That's right.
Well,
all right, what do we have going on today?
Absolutely. Today we have Batya Ungar-Sargon, who will join us to discuss new updates on the Hunter Biden probe, and Dr. Rodrigo Zidane will help us break down the situation in Shanghai, which is suffering from very, very strict coronavirus lockdowns. Does not make Kim and I very happy.
No, really crazy stuff going on there. So we'll be hearing about that. But first, let's give you some updates on Ukraine. In a video addressed to South Korea, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy said that tens of thousands of people have died in Mariupol, much higher than previously suspected. However, NBC News was unable to verify a death toll in Mariupol after reports of Ukrainian soldiers driving off Russian assaults in the country's eastern regions. And as the battlefield shifts, Zelenskyy is calling on President Biden to do more and said that Ukraine's fate depends on the U.S. supply of weaponry to Ukraine.
Just last week, the U.S. pledged to send new weapon systems to Ukraine after the NATO foreign minister agreed to provide Kyiv with arms deliveries as well. So far, the U.S. has sent $1.7 billion worth of supplies. And NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said NATO is working on a plan for full-scale military presence on its border in an effort to battle future Russian aggression. Originally, it was reported that NATO forces were planning a permanent presence at the border, but Reuters since changed that headline. So
yeah, I mean, because what is permanent? You know, how can you say something is permanent? I mean, it very well could end up being permanent, but I guess you don't really want to make that sort of commitment. But you know what's really interesting about this is to say, okay, there's going to be a NATO presence, a nearly permanent or just a very long-term, very substantial, significant presence of NATO. Who pays for NATO? The United States pays for NATO.
Right.
So is the United States going to be going over there and supplying troops and more weapons to defend Europe against a threat that, you know, look, I know I didn't believe that Russia was going to be invading Ukraine. Neither did Zelenskyy, neither did Germany, neither did France. But I don't really think there's an actual threat to Europe for a Russian invasion of some sort. Russia has a very unique relationship with Ukraine. Ukraine is very different for Russia. They call it Little Russia. It's always been that way. Ukrainians are Little Russians. It's a very, very different relationship with Ukraine than, for example, Poland or the rest of Europe. So I don't know if this is, you know, I don't know how great the threat actually is to Europe, but nonetheless, we're going to be spending tons of money. The United States spends, on average, about $800 million to NATO. The next highest spend is something like 10 times less than that, 80 or 60 million dollars annually. So now we're going to be defending Europe. I guess we withdraw out of Afghanistan in order to go and spend a bunch of money on weapons for defending Europe against a threat. Like I said, I don't think is that big of an actual threat. I could be wrong, but
I agree with you. I don't think. Yeah, I don't think the rest of Europe is actually threatened. Not right now, at least. Probably not ever. Like you said, and it's different. It's a different circumstance, right? We're arguing over Ukraine, and you know, I think what Russia is doing is terrible, and they should absolutely stop. But the claims they're making about Ukraine, like you said, are not claims they're making about the rest of Europe more generally. And even if they were, isn't it a problem that the U.S. is virtually solely responsible for the death for the defense of the free world? American voters have indicated to their political leaders how many times that they don't want us to be the world police. They don't want they don't want our government to take that role. They want our government to concentrate on problems domestically, issues that we're facing. They don't want this global policeman-like thing. And yet, that's the role our government leaders and it doesn't matter which party's in charge, frankly. Even though Trumpian Republicans talk about no, we're going to be not world police, we're going to be domestically focused. It always ends up in this. We'll protect all of Europe. Yeah, we'll stay in the Middle East forever, and it's not what the voters want. It's not what they want our government to do.
Right. And I'd really like to know who is driving this kind of NATO talk that we're going to be putting more forces right up on the border, on the NATO border. I'm curious who's driving that, because I'm not, is it the United States? Is it the military industrial complex saying, hey, here's a great opportunity for us to have a reason to have to manufacture a lot more weapons? Is it the United States and the military industrial complex based in the United States that's driving it? Or is it Europe? Are they genuinely afraid? And they're really asking to ramp up some NATO presence because, with Europe, they're in a very delicate relationship with Russia as it is.
Right.
They cannot stop the supply of natural gas from Russia into Europe. Russia has got them, in a pretty tough spot, especially right now in the summer. Okay, they can get away with it. But come fall, I mean, once August hits, if they're not ensuring a steady supply of a hefty amount of natural gas from Russia, they're in a whirlwind of trouble in Europe. So I'm curious, are they the ones that are saying, oh, yeah, let's amp up this Cold War with Russia and make it worse? Or is it the United States and the big, powerful industries that are manufacturing these weapons? I think that's a good question to ask. Who's driving this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think we often... It seems like, right, it would be the moneyed interest, it would be, the defense contractors, the people who make money, building and selling these weapons. And I do think that's a part of it, but it's also, it's just political I mean, we can't, how do we explain that the media is gung-ho pro-war? How do we explain that, that not every political leader is profiting financially from that kind of hawkishness, even though hawkishness is just always the default? So it must be
right.
It's ideological is what I'm saying, in addition to any kind of pressure that, right? Like, it has to be. It's just somehow it's the ideology of the people who seek out office, who seek out roles, planning national security, being involved in the process, who by default, I think they can tinker, or think, oh, if we put the troops here, we do that. Like, they approach it like they're playing Risk or Axis and Allies or something, which is not the way any normal thinking human approaches it. But the people who love to tinker and fiddle and plan, they feel like it. They view it differently.
Well, we know war gets clicks, and that's good for the news business, right? They have to have some sort of scandal or trauma or drama in order to keep eyeballs glued to the screen. So this is just the new COVID, right? It was COVID for so long, and now it's the war in Ukraine. And for politicians, it helps them feel and look powerful to their constituents. They get to look like the strong man, and people like to vote for a strong man. So
I guess,
maybe,
but their constituents cannot be clearer that we do not want this kind of, do not want overcommitment to defend other countries. But
it's definitely a new attitude these days with the constituents. But I know we want to talk about the more of the warmongering kind of rhetoric about genocide potentially in Ukraine. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan appeared on ABC and said the administration has not yet legally determined whether Russia has committed genocide. Let's watch.
It was about a week ago that President Biden said that he didn't think this was genocide. Does he still stand by that, or is that calculation changing?
We haven't yet reached a determination on genocide. That is a determination that we work through systematically. There is a unit at the State Department that gathers evidence and then makes a legal analysis, because genocide is actually a legal determination. But let's set legalities aside for a minute, John. I think we can all say that these are mass atrocities, these are war crimes, these are shocking and brutal acts that are completely unacceptable, beyond the pale for the international community.
I mean, absolutely, definitely terrible. Sullivan also revealed that Biden will not visit Ukraine after UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson visited Kyiv over the weekend. Kyiv's mayor seemingly took a jab at Biden after the mayor said Johnson's visit showed the world whose Ukraine's real friends are. I mean, look, it is atrocious. War is horrible. War crimes, atrocities, death, destruction. It is horrific what is happening to those Ukrainian civilians and the people that are being forced on both sides of this conflict to fight when they don't want to. It's terrible. Genocide, though, is very charged language, and that is meant to get people to rally around and say, yeah, we got to go in and we have to invade Russia. Genocide is the eradication of a group of people specifically, like you're trying to get rid of that particular group. And I don't think Russia's trying to get rid of Ukrainians That doesn't seem like that fits what's going on here.
Right. I don't think so either. And also, we just have no idea. So I was actually glad to hear a government official say, well, we really don't know yet. How could we know yet? We barely have any comprehension about, what the situation is on the ground. At least maybe they're privy to information we're not privy to. But, the dueling kind of media narratives you can't trust. Obviously, you can't trust what you hear from Russian sources, but you also have to take with a grain of salt, as you do, Kim, and it's appropriate that what you hear from pro-Ukrainian sources. So I don't know how we could even make that determination.
Well, and we kind of do know, because they're not going around slaughtering all these civilians. I mean, we are seeing instances of crimes, but by and large, they're trying not to target the civilians. So if they were trying to eradicate Ukrainians, they would be rounding them all up and doing a mass extermination of some kind, or, something along those lines. I mean, maybe you could make the case that they are trying to commit a genocide against the Nazis, the people that they claim to be Nazis, the Azov Battalion. I think that could be a fair claim. I don't know, so maybe there could be discussion on that, I suppose.
I don't know if maybe they're trying not to target civilians. They've certainly killed a great deal of civilians because war. That's what happens in war. And it's a little weird to be like, oh, yeah, war is fine, but if it's genocide, then that's no good. Like, killing people is bad. Marching into someone's country and killing them is bad. Like, whether the bomb falls on a building and all the people die in it, or they're, shot in the streets later. Like, we're starting to draw very weird distinctions. I think killing people is wrong, and it's sort of always when we go, well, but this was really wrong because this was their reason, and it's bad, and we have to have a more committed anti-war ethos. Or there's some kind of, I think the genocide determination actually is one liberals want to wield because it speaks to a kind of then we can bring race into it. They're trying to cleanse an ethnic population, which is the modern liberal framework for discussing all political issues. Well, what does it have to do with race? What does it have to do with identity? I don't think that really fits the circumstance at all. It can just still be a appalling crime without fitting that kind of framework.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but U.S. intelligence is pushing the narrative that Putin may use Biden's support of Ukraine as a pretext to interfere in American politics. That's. Obviously, that is something they might do. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. Too much has been made of their efforts in the past. The kind of media obsession with the idea that Trump was ostensibly involved in colluding with Russia to steal the election, and that their pathetic efforts on Facebook, with Facebook groups and ads and targeted social media stuff, made this massive difference, which is just preposterous. And every post-mortem of the election has found that it didn't contribute anything.
I mean, it's just extremely hypocritical to be oh, well, watch out for this next election because there might be something. If the outcome isn't the way we want, well, we know why. Okay. All right.
Yeah. I'm so sick of both sides saying, I lost the election because of massive, conspiratorial, unfair forces went up against me. I didn't just lose because the voters were sick of my BS. I lost. It's not my fault, which is a very both sides thing to do now. Now that we hate the phrase both sides, but they absolutely do it.
Tell you right now, if Biden loses in 2024, it is Biden's fault. I don't think anyone right now believes that Biden will win in 2024, meddling or no meddling by any outside foreign power. He's screwing it up on his own. There's no need to blame it on anybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Kim, well, we'll tell you what's on our radars coming up next. Stick around.